Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's your boy Skip, aka Skipntosh, here with my man Wes. Say what's up to the people, Wes.
Howdy, everybody. I hope you're ready to talk about some Batman and the Outsiders. Some of
I
that
hope so
Bryan Hill
too.
goodness, baby.
Man, this one was really interesting. Really interesting to say the least. But honestly, that was my expectations for this. I just wanted a really interesting story, and of course, the story written by Brian Edward Hill, who is also writing Fallen Angels from the Dawn of X series of books that spun off of Jonathan Hickman's House of X and Powers of Ten. So I, that are the Fallen Angels concept is already interesting. So in a way, I was kind of looking at this a little bit like a peek into, an additional peek into how Brian Edward Hill would deal with an ensemble. And I've read up into issue number 3 of Batman and the Outsiders. Wes, how much of Batman and the Outsiders were you familiar with before reading this story?
I believe I got through issue 6 before the Year the Villain tie-in started, and I just dropped all DC ongoings because I got annoyed with it.
That's right. Yeah, that was a known fact. If you've been watching the Thinking Critical reviews and whatnot, Wes has made it known that he just couldn't couldn't go along with the lines of it, and in good consciousness continue to give, or get conscious continue to give his money to this Year the Villain scheme thing. But luckily, this is an annual, and it obviously kind of took a detour from that storyline. But Wes, I'll kind of start it off with you. We know where we start off in the book.
Skip, I got to throw you a curveball this week.
Oh, what's up?
My baby needs a milk. Can you powder for 3 or 4 minutes while I go take care of the baby?
Absolutely, baby. That's why I stream. I can hold it
I'll
down.
be right back.
All right. So Wes is taking care of the most important duties that a man with the family could take care of. So yeah, I got to bear and deal with me for a little while. Yeah, to me, before, I won't dive too deep into it without Wes actually being here. But like I said, Brian Edward Hill, who I had read, not only this, I'm trying to think of some of the previous books I had read from him, which were interesting. Actually, they don't come to mind right now, but he is a writer that I always looked at and, admired the fact that it seems like he really cared about the characters. He cared about the story. And he also was always wise enough to know, hey, I need to do a little bit of a spin on this, because I do want to respect the characters, and I do also want to give the readers a good story, but I need to take it in a not so typical, not so predictable direction in order to still give someone stuff that's familiar, but at the same time, a little bit of something that they never seen before. So this book from start to finish, was that to me, quite a bit. And I'll kind of give you my overall thoughts on it and how I felt about it. Overall, I really enjoyed it. Controversially, maybe I don't know how controversial it would be. I don't know the temperature of the room for Brian Edward Hill, but this is probably one of, if not the favorite thing that I've written from him, from the big two. Unfortunately, I haven't had a lot of time to get to American Carnage, which was his Vertigo book. So I didn't get to see that side. And traditionally, I'm more of a person who really enjoys indie books. And these days, just because of the temperature of DC and Marvel and kind of what the big two have turned into up until Donny Cates and his Venom and Carnage series, and Jonathan Hickman with this. So that's traditionally where I go. I usually go to indies, but in this particular case, Brian Edward Hill writing Batman and the Outsiders, and I'm a fan of Katana and Black Lightning. I've always liked the character. And there hasn't been too much that I read where I was like, oh yeah, I want to continue to read along with this. This book is probably the exception to the rule. But here we are. My main man Wes is back from a covert mission in the world of delivering secret bottles. He might be part of X-Force. We won't talk about it. But but my man Wes, with us bringing it back around to Brian Edward Hill and this Batman and the Outsiders annual, we kind of know how the book starts off with Black Lightning and Katana over in Japan, which is one of my favorite places, though I've never been there. what did you think about the first scene and kind of how they set up the rest of the book with like that little tale that was told?
I really liked it, and I got to start out by saying the art by Max Raynor is excellent. I really like Dexter Soy's art. He's great in Batman and the Outsiders, but this is just as good, maybe even a little bit better. I was shocked. I had with no expectations. I remember him. I think he did Sideways, which is a pretty decently illustrated book, but this is way better than that.
He did a little bit of Sideways. Sorry
Okay.
to cut you off. He did a little bit of Sideways. My boy Kenneth Rockeford from Northern California, who also did the Ultimates, the second or the first half of the Ultimates. He was the one that started off Sideways, and that's why Sideways looked dope.
He did I think the first 3 issues before he took over. But
yeah, exactly.
So the beginning little tale, it's really cool. It gives some history into Katana and her backstory and her family history and the history of her blood. And the story is all about her blood and what her family's destiny is, if you will. And it's really cool. They set up the villain. His name is, what is it? It's Tsutomu.
Tsutomu.
And so her like great grandmother is fighting Tsutomu, and she's got the power of the elements and all that, and she's wielding that. And there's just one great scene where she finally vanquishes him, and she's like going through. It was really exciting.
Yeah, no, that was something that I was excited about. Like so much of this book was just overall to me really, really, really exciting. And I had seen someone else say it, so I'm piggybacking off of this. This is not an original idea because when I had seen it, I hadn't yet read the book, but someone was talking about like the anime tropes, or really the manga tropes, a little bit of anime, but really the manga tropes that were very creatively and very perfectly placed throughout this storyline, which I thought was just, it really, 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 especially for where the story took place, really kind of helped bring it alive for me and kind of really make it something special as opposed to, oh, it's an annual, I know it's supposed to, I know it's going to be a few extra pages maybe or whatever, but Bryan Edward Hill, I mean, I'll tell you one thing the man doesn't do, and that's slack off. He brings it to you every time. That's why I do believe he will be a very, very solid screenwriter, hopefully in Hollywood and for TV. But we get to keep him in comics for right now, so I'm gonna enjoy that time. So Wes, we get the build up, we get the story, we know it's about her blood. Let's talk about some twists and turns. What were some of the twists and turns throughout the book that if there were any that caught you off guard or that you agreed or disagreed with?
Well, I like let me just say this. I like themes of destiny, of fate. Like you are fated to do this, and she's clearly fighting her destiny. And I have lots of theories and ideas about destiny. I am a Christian, so I do believe I have a path destined for me. But I also believe you have to be an active participant for that destiny to be achieved. So she's actively participating against it because she doesn't want to participate in that. And in doing so, she's put her husband in danger. And her husband Maseo resides in her sword. His soul's in there, and her sword has essentially been infected by this Tutsumo or Tutsu.
Tutsumo, you got it.
Tutsumo, yeah. He's been infected there, and he's essentially in her sword, torturing her husband, like basically forcing her to come in and meet him, like on a field of battle. And I thought it was very inventive. I liked it a lot. It's really interesting. Like I said, I love like ideas of destiny and how do you achieve it, or do you even want to?
Right.
So were there any twists or that you had in mind that you wanted to talk about?
I myself, being a Christian man and a believer in Jesus, I believe in my destiny. I also agree that we got to be active participants. No place that you're trying to get to will you arrive there by just staying in the lazy boy the whole time. So you got to get up, get out, and get something. You gotta be moving, and that was something that I appreciated about this. That seeing her know what her fate is supposed to be, seeing her actively fight against it, and then seeing her accept a portion of it, for what it was, and then make her decision in how exactly, she's going to proceed, with that. For me, again, this is a bit of a spoiler discussion. So for anybody who doesn't want to be spoiled, that was your warning once again. But it's kind of implied, I would think, in the name Outside the Bleed. Wow, which is even more topical, Outside the Bleed, and it's all about the blood. I guess we were destined to do this review, huh, Wes? But
Absolutely.
From the part where, like not too deep into the story, where she goes and she talks to her sister, who is her sister via the village that they were raised in, and how they were raised not by the blood, which is interesting. She thinks about what she needs to do. She understands how much, which is so funny to think about someone being in danger when they're already not on the, they've been loosed from this mortal coil. But she makes a decision, and she pulls out the katana, and is it seppuku? Is that the name of it? But she drives her blade straight through herself and takes her own life. And that is actually the beginning of the actual journey, in the story in this book. That one, I will say, like Quicksilver, I didn't see that coming.
Yeah, I did either.
I was like,
I had thoughts. I was like, well, how's she gonna get there? She gonna use a magic spell and enter the sword or whatever. There's like, it's only one way in. Gotta die. Okay. So that was really well executed. And I like it's kind of like Jefferson, Black Lightning is kind of there along for the ride. He kind of represents the reader who's learning this information from Tatsu and what her blood means and why she's opposed to traveling down this path, and then now she's accepting her fate, that she actually has to do it because it's more than herself. So I thought I was well executed.
Absolutely. And I also like the fact that which I mean, we understand why the book is named what it is, Batman and the Outsiders. They needed to slap Batman. They had, like, Bryan Edward Hill had a great idea, and they were like, all right, this is how we're going to get it to sell. We're going to slap Batman's name in there, and we're going to bring him in, and we're going to bring him up every now and then. And it's like, This isn't actually a Batman and the Outsiders book. This is a Black Lightning and Katana book.
But, absolutely.
And they're insiders.
And they're teaching Bruce's understudies that he doesn't have time for, Orphan and Signal. And bringing them up and making them heroes themselves.
Exactly. Which, I like the fact that it is these two, doing so. And I think they were Katana. I didn't, not that I didn't see her as someone that could be like a teacher and everything, but she was a bit of an odd choice. But at the same time, her composure, her countenance, puts her in a place to be, that calm, while Black Lightning brings the fire. He brings the passion. He burns, and even though she burns, she simmers, and they're a good, oh gosh, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but they're a good yin and yang for this story.
She's the perfect number two, because she's severely competent. She will follow orders until she thinks they're BS, and then she will call you on it. So It's the perfect foil to Black Lightning, who is essentially presented as a very noble and heroic character, who says, if I make mistakes, I need someone to call me on it. And she's like, yes, I will do that. And we know she will. And so
absolutely. And you need someone like that around, like accountability is something that's lost, I feel like, on this generation and in this day and age. But the value of it, if we get past, if we get over ourselves and the fact that someone calls out, or no one likes to be, well, I do, but I'm weird. Most people don't like to be called out on their stuff, but it's something that's needed, because it's that person that says, hey, don't keep walking that way. You're going to walk off the cliff because you're looking at your phone. That's an advantage. So I love that Bryan Edward Hill went ahead and set that up. And I also love the fact that they are the two main people in this story. I love that Orphan and Signal and Batman have nothing to do with this story. And it is an annual. So, with an annual and I'm, and thank you for everybody in the chat. I really appreciate everybody who's just lighting it up and talking to us, because the conversation continues there and in the comments after the video. But that is the thing with annuals, right? Annuals are always a bit of an isolated story. In some cases, they have nothing to do with the mainline story. in not so uncommon cases. But this one, the reason why I like the pace of it and where it went, and not that I thought it was a perfect comic. There's no such thing as, I don't believe there's a such thing as a perfect comic. And if there is, Wes, you'll have to show it to me. But I liked that it was an enclosed story, and it was more about their relationship growing, because as much as they hold their positions and, Black Lightning leads and Katana follows and then checks, if need be, and then they course correct, like their personal relationship was always something that was in question. And if you kind of look, Black Lightning, was kind of the one calling about Batman, you don't trust people enough. And Batman kind of put it back on him like, well, do you trust people enough? You're good at leading people, but do you trust them? And how much do you let them in? I really, really love that. Like you said, Wes, Black Lightning takes our role as the reader and kind of goes along for the ride. But in doing so, he understands Katana in a way that, on a depth and a level that he had never understood her before. And going forward, and I don't know, have we heard any news about this being canceled, this series?
Not that I've heard. I haven't heard that it's going to be made into a miniseries. I hope not.
Okay. I hope not too. But going forward from this, as annuals may or may not always have to do with the main storyline, there's no way that what happened in this book doesn't impact them going forward.
Mm-hmm. And I've got to say, before they go into the realm, she was talking about her husband being trapped in the sword. And then the graphics when they show him in there and he's being tortured was it was amazing. I loved it. It was probably my favorite panels.
It was pretty menacing. Like, and even the villain, how they set the villain up. Cause like I said, I'm someone who's, really into Japanese lore and Japanese culture. And one of my really good friends, one of my best friends, he's Japanese and he lives between here and Kyoto. Like he flies back and forth either once a month or once every 2 months. So he's always sending me pictures and, telling me to come. And I'm like, well, if, I'm a single dad with 2 daughters. So if you want to sneak us in your luggage, I'll be there next time you fly home. But even the villain, like I'm a huge fan, of like Akuma, or Akuma, as most people call him from Street Fighter. So much of him and his, and that I saw inside of the villain. So when he had like the husband's head, in his clutches, it was almost like when Thanos had Thor's head in his hand, and he had the Power Stone to his head when he was threatening Loki. Give me the stone. It just reminded me of, it's just menacing. And when you do have villains, it's not that I don't like villains. It's just, my villains aren't my heroes. Heroes are my heroes. But when you have someone to put them to the test, so you can test the mettle of your heroes, it should heighten and bring out the heroicism even more. So thank you for calling that out, Wes. That's a good call. Now let's talk about some of the criticisms, because we've been giving the book its fair due and its fair praise. Wes, what were some of the things that you felt that you were a little critical of this book?
The biggest problem for me in this book was in between the initial 2-page story where we get the backstory of her family, and when they finally up on the rooftop and she kind of explains that, I've always been drawn to like kill myself kind of. The pacing's off. It's a little too decompressed.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little too slow. It's probably 3 to 4 pages too long. A little too much slice of life for me. Other than that, I think it is a really solid story. But that part right there, they could have tightened it up just a little bit for me.
Absolutely. You actually called out kind of the only thing I really had an issue with, outside of in some of the panels, some of the and usually I can distinguish between whether it's the inks or the coloring. To me, it's hard to tell which one impacted which, but there was some kind of like either inking or coloring issues when with Black Lightning, specifically when he's on the rooftop. I'm looking at him now, and honestly, excuse me, and probably has a lot to do, because I even saw someone in the chat say earlier that Black Lightning needs a costume overhaul, and I don't disagree with that at all. But also when you do him at night, you can run into challenges with him. So some of the ink, I can't tell again if it's the inking or the coloring, but some of it on one page in particular, I believe it's page number 24, just kind of kind of took a shift and felt a little off to me. The decompressed storytelling for those pages, it's funny that I mentioned it's an annual, and usually annuals are a few extra pages or whatnot. I really have a feeling that was more editorial than it was Bryan, and I'm not trying to just, I'm not trying to just let him off the hook, but at the same time, like I feel like I'm pretty good on distinguishing what is, and we never really know, I'm speculating, but what is a creative decision, and then what's an editorial decision. And these days, as terrible as editorial is, it almost feels like it rarely feels like they help with the story. It always feels like they hurt it, either by saying make it take longer or speed it up, or you have to put this in there. It really feels like they tell people to take stuff out anymore, or say, hey, here's a creative idea. Like the Lin Weens of the world, and the Marv Wolfmans of the world just seem like they don't exist anymore. So that was, outside of a little bit of the shading and the inking, that was probably my main issues with the book.
But
mhm.
there was some really cool parts when she was talking about always wanting, being drawn to jump off the cliff, and it's a weakness of mine. I've always felt like I needed to die, because that was her destiny calling to her. But she didn't know it until this moment that she actually did need to die, kind of thing. I thought was really interesting. And then one of the commenters actually mentioned this too. At the end, she kind of just beats him a little too fast.
Right, yeah, it was really quick. Which like that one again. I don't know. That one is a little harder to distinguish for me, whether that's more of a writing choice or editorial. Yeah, because I mean, easily if you would have gone away from some of the slice of life part when she was having that dialogue, which I did feel was relevant. I just felt like maybe a page, even one page, or I don't know. Can you do pages and a half anymore? I don't know. I don't try not to think with limitations, but even one page cutting out of that would have given us, another page and maybe multiple panels of having that go a little bit longer. And I think they even could have, I mean, truth be told, even if they wanted to take some pages from the slice of life thing and then add a few more, towards the end. But I also do get, and it's not that I disagree, but I do understand that the point of the story wasn't nearly as much about the villain as it was about her,
the relationship.
Exactly. So but just because that's the point doesn't mean it should necessarily take away, because if this is a character piece and then we talk about serving the story as well, just because it's a character piece doesn't necessarily mean and doesn't give it credence to just take away from the story. So I do agree that if the fight at the end, I don't want to say drawn out is maybe the wrong word, but if there could have just been a little twist and a little change to where there was something, I mean, not that there weren't things that seeded, but just a little bit more, that would have been a more impactful defeat, or vanquishing of the villain, I think would have made it that much sweeter. That's the only thing I could think of.
We spoiled the ending. She wins, but in order for her to do that, she has to accept her destiny, and she essentially is speaking to her long lost relative who vanquished this foe before, and she accepted the power of the elements. And this is certainly going to impact Katana moving forward in the DC universe, and Batman and the Outsiders specifically. So do you think now that she's returned to the mortal world, which she did, does she now have elemental powers, or is she going to have to work on that?
It's hard to say, because it wasn't so definitive from what I remember it, whether she does or she doesn't. I would think that you might want to nail that down a little bit more next time around. But again, some things, and I know because of how editorial works and because of how uncertain things can be in comics, I know that might have been left a little open, for business reasons outside of creative reasons. But to me, she's always, we know her sword and what it can do, and how it's, whether you want to say blessed or cursed, but we understand that it has the souls of the people that were slain, that she slays, as well as her husbands inside of it. But I've always felt that Katana, kind of was more on the I mean, that's a very spiritual concept.
Hmm.
That's, we can tie magic into it as, as well, and put it in that whole realm. But I always felt like her power didn't necessarily come from her sword anyway. Her power came from within, and her love for her husband, and her determination, and her dedication to be with him, even with him being in this form now. It almost reminds me of a Brother Voodoo, like Brother Voodoo and his whole thing of like how his brother is, spiritually attached to him, and is kind of, like, not so much it's a result of what they've gone through, but his brother doesn't give him the power. It's
Yeah,
his dedication and his love for his brother that gives him the power. So I feel like there's a parallel between Katana and Brother Voodoo, but their power really comes from who they are, their dedication, to their loved ones, and going from there. But what do you think, Wes?
no, yeah, like I think her husband in the sword is her motivation. It's what drives her forward. It keeps what keeps her centered. She obviously still loves him. That's not going away, and she's gonna, you know, uh, honor his spirit and his soul of who he is. By being a hero and using the blade for good. Despite how much pain it's caused her personally. So I think I like that juxtaposition. Is it a blessing? Is it a curse? Well, technically it feels like it's both. But I did like when she finally returned. She defeats and she wakes up, and Jefferson's fighting like the spirits. All of a sudden she's like chopping them all down. It's something that he couldn't do. It kind of shows that, is she more powerful now? It certainly kind of looks like it, but it's certainly not confirmed. Maybe that sword could do that the whole time, but because we never saw her encounter him before she passed away.
Right.
Um, I do think this is going to have ramifications. It certainly makes their relationship closer. Jefferson understands Tatsu on a higher level now, and they've been through something traumatic together. He witnessed her die, and protected her body on a rooftop, so she could go avenge her husband and free him from being tortured. So they've certainly done something together that's meaningful, and I do think that these powers are going to manifest somehow. Probably not immediately, but I think that's something that Bryan's probably working towards, is like a long-term goal for the character to help grow and flesh her out even more.
Which makes sense because, like, as cool as Katana is, she's kind of been really, I mean, which isn't terrible, but like the growth of the character has been kind of minimal over time. Like, or I mean, like, I don't even I think incremental might be the wrong word, but it's been rather minimal. So I think this is really cool. And death is intimate, right? But birth
Mm-hmm.
is intimate, death is intimate. Um, and now in that spiritual way, Black Lightning has been there for both, for her. He's
Mm-hmm.
been there for her death, and he's been there for her rebirth. And she has been reborn in a sense. So a rebirth, rebirth is something that's very important to us as Christians, to be born again. So in her rebirth, she might have established new powers, and new things that she couldn't do before. But again, that there wasn't as much of a pin put into that, but it's open-ended enough that where if you did read the annual, which if you're reading along with it, then you would have, then next one comes out, you would know where the source of her powers come from. And Bryan isn't traditionally the type to just kind of leave things, just kind of like hanging on a wire. He'll make a point of letting us know, that's where it came from. Black Lightning again will be us like, oh, so that's where it came from, but in a much cooler way.
Absolutely.
than I just said. But closing thoughts, Wes, on the book.
Well, I do like fleshing out Katana. One of the weird things that they did recently, like they gave her like a 30-year-old, like 6-year, like alien that has like a 6-year-old's personality, and she's like raising her in an apartment. I'm like, I was like, this is stupid. This doesn't work for this character. This isn't how you develop that character. This is much better. Some rebirth, stakes, perhaps newfound power, accepting her destiny, propelling her to a greater level of hero as a hero. And I think it, like I said, it progressed the relationship. I think this was really good. I would rate the art like 4.5 out of 5. I think the art is the best thing about the book, and I really like Bryan Hill's writing. The characterization's probably about a 4.5, I would say the plot's right at a 4. So this is like a, a 4.5 book. This is a book I would highly recommend. I think you don't need to read the rest of the stories to get into this and enjoy it. There's some pacing issues and in a couple spots, but overall, this is a really good comic book, and people should definitely read it. It's a lot of fun.
Absolutely. This would be highly recommended from me, apparently as well as Wes. Like the combination of the art, the combination of the character work, and then the overall story. With the slight and the few criticisms that we have, because notice we're pretty critical people, and we only have really a little handful, like a small handful of things. So outside of that, I think it's just such a fun adventure. And then I like the shifts that it takes. I like the overarching theme and tone. And then a lot of the undertones are just like nice and subtle. Nothing beats you over the head too much. You know what I mean? Or really at all. It's a really nice, smooth ride. So it's just, if you're looking for a good comic book and you're into manga and you're into anime, I would say maybe manga a little bit more than anime. I think this is something that you would really, really, really enjoy. Wes, anything to plug before we're
absolutely
plug?
So if you want to be part of the Thinking Critical family, talk to Skip and myself about comics offline, you don't have to be on Twitter. You can come and join our Discord. The server name is in the description. And also, we have a partnership with Tabu Ohana. Tabu Ohana. I always say it wrong. Tabu Ohana gaming chairs. And Skip has a special code. You get a discount if you go to their website. And there's a link to the discount in the description as well. Is there anything else you want to talk about that one?
No, they do a lot of work with orphans, and like I said, that was really my biggest draw to them. So I'm a big lover of kids, big supporter of kids, and kids in need, are a big thing that's always on my mind and my heart. So, I thought it was awesome. It was hard to not want to be a part of it. So thanks, Wes, for giving them that information. Thanks for plugging the Discord as well. You can come and talk to us offline about various things. We've got tons of different chat rooms, and we'll probably be adding a few more as time goes on, and probably also add a suggestion one just so people can drop little other bits of feedback and suggestions, and then we will apply. We'll talk about them, because we can't just apply every single suggestion, but we'll talk about them. We'll go over them, and the ones that work along with our vision, we will definitely apply. And also don't forget, guys, if you want to help support us, there's tons of different things that we're looking to do as far like plans for the future that we're trying to start around the New Year's time, and to do things, even digital things. It costs money. So if you guys want to help out with that, you can buy us a coffee, quote unquote, with our coffee. There should be a link in there for you can do a one-time contribution, even if you just want to give $1. $1 helps. If 5 people give $1, if 20 people give $1, that can help pay for a podcast subscription or pay for this service. And it goes a long way, and we really help it, because we have tons of ideas that we want to do, like really cool things. But we need help as far as people wanting to help and volunteer. And you see Perch on the channel, and you see Chase from Gateway into Comics, and you see Ash on the channel, and the Doc, Pele. You see so many people. So we're getting some of that help more and more. But yeah, anything that you can contribute and donate, it goes right back to the show, and it helps us build this thing, because we're critical thinkers. We got big ideas. So thank you so much for your consideration alone, let alone any donations you make. And we will be back. Actually, today's Thursday. We'll be back tomorrow with some Geek Span, breaking down some news. Absolutely. And there has been some news. So thank you so much, everybody.
Yes, there has. We got a lot of stuff to talk about on Geek Span tomorrow.
Exactly. So make sure you tune in for that one as well. For my boy Wes and for myself, thank you so much for joining us on Outside the Bleed. We'll bleed again for you soon. Now we dance. We dance. The electric. Woo.
All right. Later, folks.